Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to the minigame podcast for Friday, May 30th. Starting a little late and gambling today, certainly. I was able to once again get into my follow list, which let me try to open a ton of tabs. Now I have a ton of tabs open and almost 100% of all my RAM filled up. So things are running a little clunky. I don't know if it's true for all RAM setups, but definitely I can say for my RAM setup that it definitely seems like when you approach over 50% of RAM utilization, you start to see some slowdown, and when you approach 100% RAM utilization, you see significant slowdown. I imagine that is going to be true for many people, and it definitely makes an argument for a new generation of RAM that would go up to being reasonably priced 128 gigabyte kits, 256 gigabyte kits, just double what I imagine people would really need. Even me doing large things at scale, I really do not need 128 gigabytes of RAM. I don't think gaming really needs that, but I definitely think 64 gigabytes is your sweet spot for what you're looking for. And while faster RAM will probably help you when you're focusing on just playing one game, when you're trying to open a ton of tabs or do several things at the same time, record and play a game, yeah, tripling your RAM would not hurt if you can afford it, if your system can handle it. RAM speed at a certain point is going to start to feel so fast that you won't notice the difference between something that was like 6,000 megahertz and 8,000 megahertz. If you could get up to those speeds, those are pretty high speeds. Yu-Gi-Oh's still doing its thing, just happened to be on the screen. So basically, if I try to open any tab at all, it is going to go clunky. Even just like middle mouse wheel scrolling here is moving kind of slow. And so, yeah, that is an issue. On top of that, I'm still playing this game called Runaway Road Adventure, which is oddly yet another awful point and click adventure. I've played basically 3 point and click adventure series in a row and had major problems with all 3, but I would say Runaway is by far the worst, in that so far the best I've done is been able to solve about 40% of a chapter's puzzles without having to go through a walkthrough. It just has every single problem with point and clicks. Things are tiny, they are hidden in a mess of other objects. It is very much pixel hunty. They mix in with the background. You can't press spacebar to highlight interactable objects. Puzzles have been solved using the walkthrough that I don't even understand where the hint would have come as far as what the puzzle was, let alone what the puzzle solution is. They definitely don't make it obvious as to what the actual goal is a lot of times, which the goal should be pretty obvious in a point and click. So yeah, Runaway almost feels like it's a troll game, actually trying to actively troll the player by being so bad. I suspect it may very well have been made by people who had never played a point and click, let alone made one before, and it's early 90s 3D CGI animation makes me heavily wonder if there wasn't some kind of animation project to make a TV show or a movie that fell through, and then instead they made a video game with what they had already rendered. If either way, the budget fell out at some point, because there's definitely entire points where there should be animation and there just isn't. straight up later on there's entire black screens as you hear the characters talking. Yeah, and I could go on and on. There's basically almost nothing positive to be said about Runaway. And on top of that, it's such an old game that how I was capturing the audio and capturing the video is different, and it pushed me, I guess, to get ambitious and mess with my audio settings. Inherently, there's either a case on the way I have my setup, and this is a really good argument to have something like a Rodecaster or a mixing board of some sort. It will be something outside of the realm of software and Windows. But there's a setup here where either I can listen to it one way and get an echo that drives me crazy because there's such a delay on just the audio drivers in Windows, or I can listen to it a different way and not get a delay, but then hear all of the noise amplified quite a bit in my room, which also drives me crazy, but not as crazy as the echo does. So because of that, I'm just going to basically scroll down once on each of these pages since we started a little late anyways, and try to move on, see how slow it was for my gesture plugin to activate and close the tab there. So yeah, I messed with a bunch of settings, went around in circles, and don't know if I really changed too much. I would have to get some feedback really as far as did I adjust the gain wrongly on my microphone, or am I better balanced now, and did I adjust the noise reduction. So when I'm being silent, you should be able to hear absolutely nothing, like no air conditioner, no ceiling fan, no computer fans. Inherently I have a lot of stuff making noise in this room, and yeah, I don't know how I'd really improve it much. I have half a crazy idea of trying to like block off my air conditioner vent, which is in the ceiling, and there's a bookcase next to it. Put some kind of frame around that from the ceiling downward, bend to the right angle to line up with the bookcase. Put the computer case on top of the bookcase right in front of the air conditioner, which would certainly keep it cooler, although it might blow a lot more dust in it. And then have just extended walls to all the way around that, to the point where actual cold air wouldn't even reach my room until it had already gone through the computer and bounced across some walls, to just try and have most of the sounds deadened. Which, yeah, would probably hurt the comfort of my room quite a bit, and would be kind of a crazy project. On the other hand, I think it might make more sense just to put the computer in a different room from where I am. I don't know if that still fixes anything. There definitely have been some content creators that I've heard just straight up turn off their air conditioner when they start making footage, and yeah, it's just not going to work for me. Usually that's more of a window unit situation anyways. So yeah, I'll have to get some feedback if my audio sounds terrible. I did do the good boy thing and record a little bit of audio before streaming today, just to make sure it was actually even capturing the audio. But that's about as much as I can do. Now the reason why I say something like the Rodecaster or any other audio mixer would make it easier, particularly the Rodecaster, is because the Rodecaster would have built-in noise reduction, I think, inside of itself, is that a audio interface would more than likely separate out the headphone jack from the microphone input, whereas my Blue Yeti just has a headphone jack directly connected to, has a headphone jack in it, just integrated. But you still may have to try something weird to get delays to make sense. You might have to add more delay to other sources to try and line it all up. But yeah. Now, there might be some microphones out there that have built-in heavy levels of noise reduction. But what the noise reduction I'm doing in OBS though is it's kind of extreme. It isn't just a little. It's negative 30 decibels to anything it recognizes as noise after all the signal that I get is reduced by somewhere around 15 decibels. So you take the audio with everything in it, noise and all, reduce it down to be quieter, then the anything below negative 30 decibels in its loudness is directly cut off. It works fairly well, and that is there are two settings in OBS. There's an NVIDIA noise reduction option too, which does not work particularly well for my setup. Some of the delay I may be having certainly might also be because, what in the heck is Pokemon Industrial? I should look that up. But man, trying to even open a new tab, it's just going to be a nightmare today. Today is going to be an attempt at accelerating this experience as much as possible. Now the good news is, well, this may be a terrible attempt. I did spend most of today doing follow list cleanup because I had all those follow list tabs open, although only about half of them are actually working. The other half are just frozen, but not crashing. You can't remove something off the follow list unless it has enough RAM to be running the JavaScript on the page. And so sometimes the JavaScript is running, and it's pretty easy to tell because the screenshots are shuffling around, and sometimes the JavaScript is not running. But yeah, I did manage to do some decent follow list cleanup, and I'm making progress towards overall follow list cleanup to get out of this mess, which inherently is just going to push me to the next mess, which is going to be, I really at that point need to rethink rethink my wish list some more. I am still going down the realm of insanity in that I've gotten a family member a refurbished Steam Deck as a birthday and Christmas present, just on the assumption that Switch 2s are not going to be easy to come by and nothing else new is going to be affordable and coming out anytime soon. But yeah, it's a big expense. Certainly it's a big expense. I wish it was the old days where it was $100 or $200 to get somebody a game console instead of approaching $400 to $500. There's just a different feeling to it, and maybe that is in part just my age, but I don't know if it really is an age thing as much as it is just a inflation thing. And yeah, I have several other family members that I could do the same for, and I'm just debating whether I'm going to be fair or not and do that when, if they would even appreciate it. And maybe I'll wait a month. I have time, and the only real mistake, I guess, would be that is that maybe it would just go out of supply. There was a brief couple of days there where a federal court, low-level federal court, in the sense that there are 3 levels of federal court. There's a federal courts of different circuits, as I understand it, that seem to kind of specialize on different kinds of cases within a state. And then there's a federal appeals court that I think is also, that has several circuits, I think, per state. And then if the appeals court in one circuit or in one state conflicts with another appeals court, or if they just wanted to appeal it further, then the Supreme Court can decide whether it wants to look at something and reconsider points on a case or the entirety of a case. So for a brief second there, for a couple days at most, again, I say low-level federal court. Still, you never would want to end up in federal court, particularly for any criminal reasons, said that the Trump administration tariff things was not legal. That immediately got appealed. So maybe if you were really fast, you could have rushed and bought something expecting not to pay tariffs. But honestly, I imagine nothing really would have been implemented before the appeal went in. Almost certainly, I would think the judge would say, you can't implement these tariffs, and you have 30 days, 90 days to file an appeal, otherwise my order goes into effect, which in that case the order would be that the tariffs would revert back to the Trump administration's, before the Trump administration's executive orders. The Trump administration immediately appealed that. The appeals court has said, we're going to maintain the status quo. In this case, they've decided the status quo is to keep the tariffs as they are, which arguably is true, because other presidencies of recent years, decades, have been able to do so much with executive orders, including making tariffs. So there definitely is precedents that Joe Biden administration, Obama administration also created tariffs. So they're going to have to make an argument why the previous presidencies was allowed to do it and Trump isn't, whether it's the way he's doing it, the way he's phrasing it, or the amount he's doing it being the problem, or some combination of all of that. So yes, the appeals court, which would be the middle ground, is now keeping the tariffs in the case. So yeah, for gamers, not to turn this into a huge political rant, there's every indication that tariffs will be affecting the price of the Switch 2 and all future hardware and electronics coming into the United States for a long time, and probably software will go up too, just because companies are greedy. And then yes, it would certainly be a coin flip whether the administration, the Supreme Court, would even want to take up that appeal in the first place, and whether they would side with the Trump administration or not. Inherently, tariffs hurt rich people quite a bit, and rich people are likely influencing the court systems and all levels of politics. So it certainly could go either way. Of course, tariffs affect rich people a lot less than they do poor people, because rich people only, if your average person only needs to spend, let's say, $50,000 a year to live pretty decently, then a rich person could still spend $50,000 a year and then sit on the other $1 trillion or billions of dollars they have and not buy anything. So their buying power is not going to be anywhere as affected. Apparently, Pokemon Industrial was a RPG Maker fan game. That's why I never heard of it. Excuse me, sorry. The other good news in starting late is that there's less of a chance of me immediately having to take a bathroom break, so that's good. So yeah, outside of fidgeting with my sound files and recording a little bit of Runaway, a road adventure, I'm still occasionally watching Ranma 1/2, still playing way too much games on my cell phone. Pokemon TCG has a new release with a new card pack, so things are as new as they're going to be. Although certainly they're not adding really anything that is too different from what they've added in the past. Everything seems to get updated at around the end of the month. Memento Mori has a new character out and cycling in different kinds of events. Nothing particularly new other than the new character. And then Magica Modica added a fairly significant upgrade, which adds in, I guess, a brand new story. And so I guess inherently this video game, and maybe this has happened with other video games too, probably has, there almost certainly were some Sword Art Online stories that were only told in video game form, or cell phone game form. We know one of the Nier games was a cell phone only story, and I guess the question really is any of it going to be particularly relevant? And in the case of Magical Modica, if you're a fan of the anime, you might be forced to play the game, because it doesn't seem like they are going to make any new animes. It's been 10 years, but they are telling a whole new story, which in the old days, in the 90s, or even 80s, maybe even 70s and 60s of anime, the early tape trading days, you would have those just be OVAs, or they used to be called OAVs. I think they've finally given up on calling them OAVs at this point. Original video animations, original animated videos, whatever it actually stood for. And yeah, you just don't have a lot of those anymore, where it's a direct to, in this case I guess it would be Blu-ray movie that could not be seen in any other form factor. Although weirdly, streaming definitely could accommodate that quite easily, that there would be shorter 40-minute style OVAs. And I think that is part of what made OVAs kind of stand out too, is that they aren't really claiming to be movies, and they aren't really requiring that they go at least an hour and 22 minutes, which is like, I think 82 minutes. Yeah, I think in the West, for it to be considered a feature film, it has to go 82 minutes. And definitely there's some movies that have had the stretch to hit that point. Whereas, yeah, I could see OVAs being 60-minute experiences or 70-minute experiences. And seemingly now they've become much longer experiences in the form of video games with gacha game mechanics. They've also added a whole new chaos mode, which is even more difficult enemies to fight, which definitely Magica Modica needed, because had I been putting my nose to the grindstone and actually playing it every day for an extra hour even, I definitely would have been at 100% completion by now, for maybe by a couple weeks ago. But I've just been kind of taking it slow. And as such, there's still a little bit of content that I haven't played. And there's a lot of story content, frankly, in Magica Modica that I also have skipped to look at later. Speaking of anime, I'm also still occasionally watching Ranma 1/2, and I'm just going to watch that whole series on Hulu. And weirdly, the DVDs I got, except for the Blu-ray with the OVAs and movies, are delayed by a month. So I got them cheap, but I potentially could see all of 7 seasons of Ranma 1/2 before I even receive the physical media of it. But yeah. As I was cleaning and decluttering my house, I came across what was my drafting final. I took a single semester of drafting in high school, and there was of the semester, half the semester was learning to use a software called AutoCAD to draft digitally, but the first half of the semester was to use pencil and paper. Very interesting mechanical pencils with very fine points and very light marking. And then you would go over the pencils with a ink pen, I believe, after it. But whatever I found, which I think was my final, I'm not even sure if it really was, because I don't really remember much of the class at all. Doesn't feel like it has been inked, but it's done on basically butcher block paper, very cheap paper, very large paper, basically the size of a movie poster. And for the most part, like 1/4 of an inch is supposed to be exactly to scale of 1 foot when you're drafting, doing the floor plan. So yeah, I found this paper. It was folded up, it was dirty, it was torn in places, and I put it into a cheap picture frame, which getting picture frames that are that big, basically, like a lot of things on Amazon, means buying them in bulk. So I have like 5 now, cheap picture frames. But yeah, I put it behind some plexiglass, and I'm going to now permanently fix it to my wall. I enjoyed the drafting class, but I am not unhappy that I was obsessed with becoming a video game developer and only took the drafting class in thoughts that it might help me learn some tricks and tips around 3D modeling and making video games, and maybe it did, but it probably didn't teach me much of anything actually. But I'm certainly glad I didn't take it any further, because yeah, there's only so many architect jobs out there. They get paid a lot if they get paid and get jobs, but for the most part, when people build custom houses, they are not getting so custom as you would think, as much as they are having architects license house designs that have already been designed and already been thought through for code and plumbing and electrical, and then you have architects make small changes to these licensed designs. There aren't really that many people in the United States, at least, that are pure artistic architects that make houses from scratch and do it with architects actually being involved. You get very few Frank Lloyd Wright type people, which that's the most recent famous architect I can even really name is Frank Lloyd Wright. Very often people who do design and build houses for themselves that are interesting do it just by the seat of their pants and don't have any drafting education or anything like that, which, yeah, depending on the jurisdiction you're in, might run you afoul of your local and state and federal building codes. But yeah, the draft is just the building, and I don't remember doing any of the work at all. So it's funny, you're looking at something that you worked on many years ago, and I said out loud to myself, it's just like, that wasn't me. That's somebody else that did that. It's signed my name, but I'm just like a completely different person, and I have no memory whatsoever of doing this. And I couldn't, for the life of me, justify a lot of the decisions if I put any thought into it at all as far as drafting. It's a fine draft of a house. It's not crazy. It's pretty traditional and makes a lot of sense, but I just don't see anything of myself in it, which undoubtedly is probably true, is that I really didn't think too hard about it. There might have been some limitations or regulations that I was given that I was following that kept me within the straight and narrow. And frankly, the only reason I was able to draft or draw anything is because drafting is 100% tracing and using straight edges and lines. Not tracing really, just straight edges and lines. So it is not an artistic pursuit in the individual steps at all, in my opinion. It is artistic in the big picture as far as where you're going to put something, but in the small steps, in the actual action of drafting, it is totally mechanical, a left brain, I guess, type activity, which I had earlier learned that I just had a huge mental block if I tried to freehand draw anything. It nearly failed my driver's ed class because of it, because half of the driver's ed class was to draw the stop signs and signs like that, and I just could not get my brain to put a pencil on paper and freehand draw even something as simplistic as a stop sign. And eventually I found a straight edge and started to draw things much like the drafting and do it in a very mechanical way. The only thing I could really say about the draft is it is kind of crazy in that there are 2 sinks in between, as far as I can tell, that's what it is. 2 sinks in between an oven range in the kitchen, which does not logically make any sense to me at all. Like, I have this really big kitchen. It has 2 sliding doors with a square island in the middle, a refrigerator in one corner, weirdly, a huge counter, and weirdly this huge counter doesn't seem to have like a serving window to go into the living room, which is next door. And then there's an oven range, and then there's a sink on the left and the right of the oven range with windows on the back of it. So yeah, I really just don't think I was thinking anything at all there. I have a strange layout bathroom with a shower at the far end of a bathroom, a toilet that is basically like a toilet stall next to the shower, and then you come around into the main part of the bathroom and you have 2 vanity sinks and a hot tub, jacuzzi, bathtub. Giant master bedroom with no furniture drawn in it, although this is architectural. Giant garage with nothing in it. Separated out laundry in the garage that is its own small little closet, which that's not the worst thought, except for it would be a nightmare to put a washer and dryer in and out of that small closet and move it. Maybe there's a circle here to indicate where the water heater is. I have 2 kids' bedrooms across from each other on the other side of the house, which is pretty traditional. And then I've given them weirdly large closets that then both connect into a Jack and Jill shared way too large bathroom, which the bathroom itself has this whole walled off section where the toilet and the tub are in their own area, almost in a, no, I'd say almost in a Japanese style, but even in a Japanese style the toilets are never in the same compartment as the bathtub. So yeah. And then there's apparently a stencil I had to draw something that kind of looked like bushes, and so I put some bushes on the outside. There's a weird square patio outside of a giant game room, so I probably was thinking at some point that what kind of house would I want since it has a giant game room. And this patio has a sidewalk that goes to the left of a square patio and around it, and does not have any symmetry at all to the square patio. And then it goes around the patio to another patio that's a much smaller square one. So I guess there's a big rectangular patio and then there's a small square patio, which one of the kitchen windows looks out into. And I have no idea what that was supposed to be. Almost feels like it would be a place where you put a hot tub outside. So yeah, the front door opens to a small little walled garden section and then turns 90 degrees and goes to, I suppose, the road, and then the garage opens to the back. So yeah, very few windows in the whole place. I probably rushed this. If it's knowing me in those days, I almost certainly just half-assed the whole process and wasn't trying very hard and didn't care very much, which could be my entire education in a nutshell. I got an 83 on it, which is frankly 33, yeah, 23 points more than I really needed, I'm sure, because all I was really looking for was a passing grade of, I guess 60 would have been passing, maybe 70. And the fact I got an 83 on it is really just because the drafting teacher was a nice guy and liked me. He probably should have judged me harsher. That is a pretty awful design, which ironically now, years later, I've sometimes fantasized and played with an app on my phone called, let me see if I can pull it up and think of the name. Well, I played with this app that is a 3D room designer, room decorator, house builder app, and I think I've designed a much better design to at least start with, at which point I would hand it to a real architect and tell them what to build. It's called Room Planner, roomplanner.app.com, and yeah, it starts free. Let's see. I think this is the one I've been working on. Have played on. Although, weirdly, yeah, it is. Here. So yeah, what I designed in that project was a master bedroom, 2 baths, 2 full baths, 2 bedrooms, 3 full closets. What I have in this design is much bigger, just like a 4-car garage, a theater, much more decorated because you can just pick and drop things, a master bedroom, master bath, 3 kids' bedrooms, like one of which could be turned, or any number of which could be turned into offices, although at one point I was also throwing an office in the game room to design, and it's just like way more thought out as a first thought, certainly. 2 giant hallways in this design for a giant house, with a lot more technology, certainly, and thought put into it as even a first step. So yeah, if you ever want to fantasize about winning, say, Publishers Clearinghouse or something like that, which is what I was doing, and building a house, Room Planner app, or whatever I said the name was, it's not a terrible one to play with. It's not a video game per se, though, and it definitely is trying to push you to buy actual products that would actually that you can actually purchase, and it pushes a lot of specific products it has, where obviously there's going to be a heck of a lot of other things you can buy. Yeah, and honestly, I don't know if it really helps an architect for somebody to have drawn out the floor plan of their dream house, as much as it may be a case where you would just describe to an architect what are you looking for, what do you want, and have conversations about what is actually important and what isn't, much like a good real estate agent might do for you, because you may be thinking you want a pool, and then when you see the actual options of the houses available, you may find that there's things available that don't have pools that are way better for you, or the real estate agent may tell you, hey, pools are actually not good for the resale value of houses, and they cost a lot to maintain, and they're a hassle, and nobody really uses them as much as they think they're going to do. So yeah, conversations like that may be better, and just conversations with people, like old people who have lived in houses and really know the ins and outs of, like, making sure a house has good foundation is number one. Or what is this house gonna be like once you have kids? What's the house gonna be like once those kids leave for college? What's this house gonna be like once you start getting old? What happens if you're in a wheelchair or stuck in bed and just completely bed bound? Is a house going to accommodate those kinds of things? Or you're going to end up moving right at the worst possible times when you're about to have a kid, when you're in some accident and in a wheelchair or something like that. I do believe we may have new stats for April here on the Steam hardware chart, but because this is going so incredibly slowly, I'm just going to make a promise to look over this information in more depth. No, this is the old information anyways, now that I think about it. Yeah, we don't have the May information yet, so I'm just going to close this. That's what I'm going to do. And then I haven't worked on my trending chart, so it's still a little off. And we'll move from that. One of the things certainly about the more recent house design I have built, it is insanely large for my needs. Just way too big. Not because I don't have a desire and a possibility to get enough stuff. I just don't think I have a desire and possibility to get enough people to justify it being as big as it is. Inherently, even in the house I'm in right now, I have entire rooms that I may not enter or use even once a month. And that was even the case when in my previous house, which was incredibly small, just really small. There still were entire rooms where I was just not really entering it or using it to its fullest. I have so much stuff, the house has become closer to museums or storage containers, really, storage sheds, than they do act like rooms with life and people coming in and out of it. Well, this number I don't think is updated much, but it is going down as far as the number of games on the followed list. And yeah, Runaway doesn't have any achievements on it, so it says I've been playing it for 30 hours, and while it may feel like that, it's not nowhere close to being true. And I'm going to be proven a liar and end up having to take a brief bathroom break, I think, at this rate. That's another thing I'll mention before that happens, though, is that I put a presence sensor in my bathroom, and then I never plugged it in. I just didn't get around to it, and so I'm just now plugging it in and starting to program it. Inherently, I have to have it go off and be pretty sensitive as soon as one enters the bathroom, because eventually I'm going to put dimmer controllers in the lights and have the lights come on when you just walk into the bathroom, which means no more flipping the switch right when your hands are wet or dirty, which is a great improvement in my opinion. And then what I'm going to have it do is also sense when you're a certain distance away from the sensor. The sensor is behind the toilet seat, so someone sitting on a toilet would definitely trigger it, and it's facing, the toilet faces the shower there, and it's 5 gigahertz sensor, so it's It's not a passive infrared, and it's not a camera, obviously. But it's worth always saying that. So somebody in the shower should be bouncing around and moving enough for it to assume the lights are still going to stay on. But when it gets to about 1.5 meters to 2 meters, when I'm right at the door to leave the bathroom, because it's a longer stretch of a room, it's going to send another signal to turn on the hallway lights if they aren't on already. Which, yeah, that was a slight flaw in the motion sensor switches in the hallway. It says that there isn't a motion sensing sensor directly opposite of the bathroom door, which is in the middle of the hallway. So hopefully that is going to work everything out fairly nicely. So eventually what it's going to get down to, in my insanity for smart home tech, assuming smart home tech doesn't just become impossibly too expensive to buy, which I still haven't really seen things skyrocket in price from Amazon yet. I assume they're just selling older inventory that's already been in the country. This isn't even going to load. But yeah, it's going to eventually get down to the point where every common area is going to probably have a motion sensor in it to turn lights on and off, and then bedroom areas are going to be remote controlled via a physical remote control and the app, and not motion sensors, because obviously if you're in a bed tossing and turning, you don't want the lights to come on. But then there's going to be plenty of things too that are just going to be smart bulbs controlled by one motion sensor. So it's particularly in my kitchen and dining room, there are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, there's about 8 different switched circuits of different lights. And so in the past, it's always been a case where you would enter the kitchen and you'd just be flipping light switches on and off like crazy. And it's just really bad design, frankly. And it's not like it's 8 light switches all on one panel, so you enter a room and they're all there. It's like there's a light switch over here, there's a light switch over there. Sure, this was all designed before smart home tech, but even at that, it is kind of a crazy amount. So yeah, I really can't even show much of anything here at the moment. Like, this sail here is not wanting to load. This sail here is not wanting to load. So I'm just gonna take a bathroom break at this point and give it some time. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. So yeah, I'm just gonna leave this here just in case we need it later. So yeah, Activision sale, clicking on that didn't even really take me to the front page. In fact, we weirdly just have another opening of the front page there. I don't know why. This is the Activision publisher sale, which, yeah, certainly now, since I bought a Steam Deck for someone else, the question will be, can we do the family sharing, and will it really work? Or is there something weirdly wrong with my network? Then that will probably influence what games I think about buying to a small amount, but probably not to a large amount. really. And since I basically am buying this bought it for a kid, it's not going to push me into a lot of the Activision games, in particular Call of Duty and such. And I've always tried to find as many interesting kids games that might be family friendly. That's mixed reviewed, but it's been hard certainly on PC, and it's even hard on consoles to find actually kid-friendly games. And I suppose the state of Texas has just put a law into place, and we may see an article about that is going to force Google and Apple to age verify basically everybody to make sure that kids aren't installing apps at all. So they are putting in more controlling legislation saying that kids are not even allowed to install apps, let alone make purchases on apps. Now, of course, how do you implement a system like that is always the question. But when you have those extra restrictions, you're increasingly going to have fewer and fewer people trying to make games that would, or any kind of app really, that would be for kids in the first place. And their real desire is to not have kids be entertained in any way, so that they get bored enough that they can force them to go work at McDonald's for below minimum wage. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not seeing a lot there on that Activision sale that would really catch my attention. Then the games in the New York page here doesn't seem like it's gonna load. Like, I just gave it a decent amount of time to load, and it didn't do it. Yeah, I am just pushing it to the max as far as how much RAM I have, and this certainly speaks to a thought that virtual RAM swap space is not being utilized either in Windows or by Firefox well at all, because there's clearly a point here where a lot of these tabs should be getting put to sleep, and their RAM usage should be moved into swap space on the hard drive for later usage. I've seen a couple of YouTube videos, possibly from the same person, talking about how both ext4 as a file system has gotten some major performance improvements potentially, and ButterFS or BTreeFS. I've never heard anybody pronounce it BTreeFS though, so I'm going to stick with ButterFS. Or some people have pronounced it better, not butter, B-E-T-T-E-R instead of B-U-T-T-E-R, but everything, for the most part, I've heard everybody pronounce it butter, B-U-T-E-R. It's spelled B-T-R-F-S. So, some major performance improvements potentially on that too. Although this may just be the YouTuber mentioning improvements that aren't actually that important or won't change too much. It may not speed too much up anyways even if you're using an NVMe though, because you may already be fairly maxed out on performance as far as those file systems. But yeah, you definitely don't see YouTube videos of people saying, hey, Windows 11 is improving the speed of how files work. Here we can see that the Steam Deck refurbs are out of stock once again. I should also mention that the one I ordered said it was on a 2 to 3 week delay, so yeah, it is very possible. I think it said 2 to 3 weeks. Hopefully that wasn't 2 to 3 months, but yeah, you might find some Steam Deck refurbs available and then be stuck in an order that doesn't actually arrive for weeks or even months later, past the point of the Switch 2 coming out, past the point of the anything else changing. Maybe past the point of Black Friday, maybe past the point of even Christmas. And yeah, if you have a specific birthday you're targeting, maybe past the point of that. The charts have drastically changed for the Steam Deck, which weirdly, we definitely are seeing a lot more movement in the Steam charts of who's playing what the most on the Steam Deck, as it is just a smaller group of people that is not getting, in the list is in part just not getting diluted by a lot of online games like Counter-Strike 2 that have a ton of bots and a ton of people who are just going to play that one game and only that one game. So this chart will suffer greatly if Counter-Strike 2 ever does become popular to be played on the Steam Deck. I wouldn't be surprised if it is being played on the Steam Deck to some extent. The Elden Ring Night Rain looked like it was going to be a exciting expansion to Elden Ring, but it's mixed reviewed. We'll see that later, so it's not off to a good start. Blue Prince is surprisingly still holding on quite well in the charts and people talking about it. I don't know if people are really talking about Repo anymore. That feels like that may have been more of a flash in the pan experience. And yeah, we definitely are still seeing decent numbers of new things showing up onto the charts, which is just a completely different experience from what you see on the SteamDB concurrent charts of just what people in general are playing on Steam, instead of this chart, which is only what people are playing on the Steam Deck. Yeah. And yeah, this is still just moving really slow. Seems like Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel might pop in and out on this chart at this rate. Alright, and so that's probably been roughly an hour, sans a 20-minute bathroom break, so let's go to Video Games Chronicle and see if we can go through all these news stories and start closing things. But honestly, if I closed every single tab I have open right now, I still would probably be at maximum RAM utilization. So this entire weekend is going to be about me trying to close tabs and then trying to open other tabs from the follow list in smaller chunks. I opened probably 1,200 tabs in a much slower amount of time, which obviously stopped it from crashing, but it still didn't solve the overall problem. So I think I am going to have to do it in 500 chunks, which, if there truly are 7,000 games on the follow list at this point, 500 chunks would just be 14 rounds, but the rounds are going to be long. It's going to be a lot of letting tabs open up overnight and sitting for hours upon hours going through everything on Steam on the follow list. But at least the good news is that once it's fixed, unless my solution breaks, it'll be a problem that's fixed forever. Unlike so many of my other macros, which often break as soon as something changes on the website. And I suppose that still could be the case, but I think it's once I fix the follow list being overrun by games as an issue, it won't be a problem for at least a year or two. I still need to really think about what I'm going to use the follow list for, though, too, because it's going to have some pretty tight rules once I get it completely wiped and there's just nothing in it and try to use it again. I'm going to want no games that are in early access, no games that I actually wouldn't ever play, no VR games, and it would just be games that have a slight chance of me wanting to actually play them that are a little iffy as far as maybe they're not that popular, not relevant enough, or there's something else about them. Moving on to the first Video Games Chronicle article, Death Stranding 2 is getting a live game premiere presentation during the Summer Game Fest. The Orpheum Theater event will be streamed online. I believe Death Stranding 1 was live streamed at either Summer Games Fest or the Video Game Awards, so this is just doing the same thing they did before, which makes a lot of sense. They are the creator of the Summer Games Fest and the creator of Death Stranding are seemingly on really good terms. I'm gonna have to hit the close button really quick here. Let's see. Switch 2 users can finally upload and auto-upload screenshots and videos. The 100 latest captures will be sent to the Nintendo Switch app for up to 30 days. Okay. Then I guess you have to figure out if you can take it outside of the Nintendo Switch app, or if it is literally just a system that is designed to lock you in. But yeah, we'll have to wonder about how the Nintendo apps suffer if age verification just becomes the norm throughout all of the United States. Nintendo probably won't suffer much. They really didn't heavily invest in mobile games, and very few of the AAA publishers have. The now cancelled Black Panther game would reportedly have had T'Challa's son taking on the scroll, which, is it really relevant or important to know that information now? Not really. And I think the Marvel movies mention the scrolls. I know some of the spin-off TV shows I think mention the scrolls, but I'm not sure there's ever going to be a big fight between the Marvel, whatever the Marvel Avengers are, and the scrolls at this point. And almost certainly it's not going to involve too much of Black Panther. Chie, I assume that's how you pronounce that, voice actor, says she won't reprise her role in the Persona 4 remake. The second voice actor in a week says they won't be in the unannounced remake, which, who knows, this might also be just a case where they are backing up each other and making up a rumor effectively that there is a remake. It's interesting, you have this black shadow and then one little pixel here of white, which, yeah, I don't know if these voice actors have any bigger reason why they don't want to be in the remake, or maybe they've just been told they won't be in the remake, which I wouldn't be surprised if the Japanese companies just don't really care enough about the voice actors to hire them a second time. But yeah, the full quote here from, who is this? Yuri Lowenthal, which that's an odd last name. Yuri sounds like a Japanese first name, but Lowenthal does not. It says, I will not be returning as Yosuke for Persona 4 Remake. I asked, maybe even I begged, but they don't want me. Now, a second actor, Aaron Fitzgerald, definitely not a Japanese person from that name, is claiming that she also won't be part of the game. Do we have a quote here? Will the page scroll down? I have not been asked to reprise my role as Chihei Satonaka in the Persona 4 remake. So she's just saying I haven't been asked. She's only responding because people are asking, which in fairness, I guess this is just Twitter all over again now on Blue Sky, in that people are feeling the need to respond to things when they really should just keep their mouths shut. Although you would think if these voice actors thought there was any chance of getting work, they wouldn't go onto public social media and talk about the projects at all. But we have seen voice actors do exactly that in the past. Yeah, I still question if there really is going to be a Persona 4 remake. Whether, if there is a remake, will it be particularly even that exciting? And who knows, maybe the remake would just use the original voice lines and not hire any new voice actors, and it may very well just be partial remaster. I think it would be much more interesting, certainly if there was a new Persona game announced with a whole new group of people, so everybody could start fresh. See, the My Nintendo Store's UK Pokemon Legends ZA pre-order bonuses have been revealed. Several bundles will be available. Looks like you get some little plastic toys. Yeah, and some other stuff. I'll leave it at that. Future of GTA's producers everywhere, so is in doubt as Mind's Eye adopts its creation studio suite. Okay. So, a GTA producer who very well is not the producer for the current GTA is making a game called Everywhere, and it has now been moved into Mind's Eye. The Everywhere's creation suite has been moved into Mind's Eye, which are a lot of buzzwords that don't mean much to me. Everywhere, if I recall correctly, was one of those games that was trying to be very much like Roblox or Fortnite, in that it was more a system to make the players create their own content than actually to deliver an actual game. And it was it's always questionable on those kinds of systems whether that would ever actually occur. It's highly unlikely. The UK retailer Game says some Switch 2 pre-orders have been cancelled. The retailer says it's working hard to reinstate as many affected pre-orders as possible. It seems like some people actually got through and pre-ordered, but particularly in the United States, I think it was almost 100% people who went through Nintendo to pre-order the consoles, and that process, because yeah, I checked just yesterday, the Lenovo Legion Go S is still not available for even pre-order at Best Buy, and the Switch 2 is not available for pre-order at GameStop. So as far as handhelds and new technology, nothing is going particularly great. Samsung had some interesting open box surround sound apps, surround sound systems that were wireless, which I can't imagine why you really would want wireless satellite speakers. Either you're going to have a battery that dies in them, or you're going to have to run a power cord to them anyways. Although tracking wires around the room is always a hassle in the surround sound system. But they called it 11.2.1 as far as the surround sound setup, because there was a pair of speakers that were supposed to be in the back of the room, but one side of the speakers had a side speaker that would shoot your middle side speaker channels into the room, instead of more traditionally having a separate pair of speakers for your sides. And the satellites also had speakers pointing upward to do the Dolby Atmos bouncing of sound off your ceiling, which I've heard people make decent arguments that nobody is going to ever be able to calibrate that correctly so that you could actually get a really good sound stage off the roof of a room, particularly if there's any ceiling fans or chandeliers in that room. You basically would need a flat ceiling. Even just like popcorn or texture on the ceiling might affect your audio significantly. And there is one subwoofer that was really small in the kit, and then there was one soundbar that was doing the left, right, and center with two speakers on the left and right going upward to do more up channel Atmos sound. So that's how they get it to 11.2.1 or whatever it was. It normally would be a deal that I wouldn't even mention, and I don't know why I'm mentioning deals at all. It's just a waste of time for most people. The slick deals will be done by the time I even start streaming. They'll be sold out. But it was cheap. It was like $350 for the whole setup, which, yeah, for something that probably had the surround sound built into it too, that's a pretty good deal. Of course, proper surround sound and proper speakers and wiring and everything is going to run you a lot more than that and take up a lot more space. But it, at least for a lot of people, would be a major improvement from just the speakers on your TV. But then again, most people don't care about sound enough to even get a regular cheap soundbar. Moving on, Concord's developers' commemorative release plaque is being auctioned off at a Goodwill store. Bidding on the memento has currently reached thousands of dollars. So this was apparently something they made up already before they canceled Concord, which I guess Concord is canceled. I kind of have to be reminded, but I do think it was canceled. Yeah. So weirdly, this might be of historical value, but also weirdly it may not be of any real value. And yeah, bids being high doesn't mean actually anybody's actually going to pay. Yeah. 2 weeks after its release last August, they canceled Concord Online, so yeah. Interesting, but not particularly relevant. Tiny Tina's Wonderlands is one of 2 free games on the Epic Games Store this week. Both games are free to claim until June 5th. I definitely thought Tiny Tina's Wonderlands was literally just reselling the Borderlands 2 DLC, and I think some of that may be a little bit similar, and there might even be a little bit of overlap, but no, Tiny Tina's Wonderlands is a separate game, at least when you get the DLC, as far as I understand it. The other game is Limbo, which I guess if you've never played Limbo, check that out. It's kind of a terrible time to get into Tiny Tina's Wonderlands though, because we're probably not too far away from Borderlands 4. Let's see. F-Zero and Wipeout inspired Switch 2 launch game called Fast Fusion has gotten a new trailer. The game runs up to 4K HDR and supports wireless game share. Okay. And if anything was working today, I might actually show that trailer. But I'm basically not going to click on anything today. Dynasty Warriors producer says the series still can't be called a success in the West. The latest game, Dynasty Warriors Origins, has sold more than 1 million copies worldwide, which is kind of a pathetically small amount considering how many Dynasty Warriors games have existed. And yeah, inherently I think like the Dynasty Warriors style games are just constantly trying to push this idea of a style of gameplay that people just aren't that interested in, as far as massive number of peoples that you're hacking and slashing, and needs some kind of improvement in the actual gameplay to attract a much larger audience base. And that improvement can't just be gimmicks. It just can't be make a Fire Emblem one or a Persona 1 or a Fist of the North Star one. It needs to be, we're going to do something very different with this game. Something more than just the hacking and slashing. I don't know what that different thing would be, but it probably would involve a lot more story. I think the Dynasty Warrior main series also just suffers in that it is a little too Asian looking for its own good. Traditional Asian looking. Video Games Chronicle says Elden Ring Night Rain gets off to a strong start despite mixed user reviews. A peak of more than 300,000 players have been reached on Steam already. Inherently, that's a great example of where a lot of people may be playing a game. That doesn't mean they're liking it. That doesn't mean in 6 weeks from now it's going to be a game that anybody recommends or anybody is still playing. So I would say Elden Ring almost certainly did a good job in promoting itself and hyping itself, but certainly failed. So far it seems like it's failed to be enjoyable. Multiverses has officially closed down and is delisted today. The game can still be played offline if players log in before the servers are turned off, but then obviously it won't be playable. Was this announced, or is this just a surprise delisting? I knew Multiverses wasn't doing great. Well, they announced that the 5th season would be its last, is the way they're phrasing it here. But I don't know if they inherently made it clear that that would mean you couldn't play it at all. This is yet another example of Warner Brothers, now owned by AT&T, just really screwing up with being able to do anything at all with its large number of IP it owns, which at some point here, I just wouldn't be surprised if Disney somehow manages to acquire Warner Brothers and nobody in the current US government gives a darn enough to fight it. Like, inherently, there have been cases where companies have either accidentally or intentionally weakened themselves in their market share so much so that they could just be sold to another company and not be called a monopoly, or not prove that they're a monopoly. There might be some characters here too that maybe Warner Brothers had included that they don't really want anymore. Rick and Morty potentially may be on the out. Too much controversy around that, and frankly it's just more of an adult cartoon anyways. This character I don't think is particularly relevant. I'm not even sure Iron Giant is particularly relevant. I don't think this character is particularly relevant. I don't think Gizmo to the audience that you're targeting is relevant. I don't think he's that relevant. Even this guy and the agent from the Matrix and this guy, probably this guy too, are that relevant. Which really brings it down to, like, do the Warner Brothers cartoon characters like Tom and Jerry, do the DC characters like Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman, do the Scooby-Doo characters, Tasmanian Devil, Bugs Bunny. Yeah, that probably is where it should really go, is that if you're going to have a fighting game, is to start with the characters that have proven themselves over the test of time. And I don't think that's even really the problem with Multiverses, though. I think the real problem with Multiverses is just that Warner Brothers wasn't willing to give it enough time, and they hadn't made a polished enough game that people were singing the praises of. And making a competitor to Smash Brothers is just a really, really hard thing to do. Moving on, Playtronics confirms layoffs. The landscape is shifting, and with it, so must we. So, more people getting laid off once again. I'll just leave it at that. I'm not sure I ever found any of these Yooka-Laylee games to be. I ever found one that was enjoyable. And then Elden Ring Night Rain sells 2 million copies in one day as a patch for easier solo play is announced. Maybe the game is too hard and that's why it's mixed reviewed. That'd be weird if people were complaining about it being too hard, but who knows. Anyways, that's going to bring us to the Gamatsu articles. And again, I'm going to try really hard not to click on anything. So, Bindi in the Dark Revival is coming to the PS5, Xbox Series, and Switch on July 11th. Normally we would look at the Steam links here. The demo for that weird game Dispatch that was announced, I believe last year, if not the year before, where you're a superhero dispatcher sending out superheroes to save the day from behind a telephone. Looks like it is probably just going to be a Telltale Walking Dead style visual novel type game. Game called Quartet launches August 26th for PC, in late 2025 for PS4 and Switch. Which, again, I wish I could scroll down here and see more, but even on Gamatsu, which maybe is a little bit less chunky, it is still incredibly chunky. And if I click the Steam link, it's going to open a Steam page, and yeah, Steam may be a little bit less clunky, but only by a little. might very well be dancing on the edge of having just barely enough RAM free. An indie Japanese style RPG crossover, Infinite Allegiance, has been announced for modern consoles and the PS4 and the Xbox One and the Switch, which inherently I have not been able to rewrite how they're going to phrase it on Gematsu, which I guess is going to be phrased this way, in that they're going to name a bunch of modern consoles, and then my text rewriter is just going to rewrite that as modern consoles. Then they're going to name all the older versions. So I need to hold on to this tab to add a new case in my text rewriter extension to phrase that in a shorter form, just to say all consoles, which that was pretty much all consoles, I think. Yet another 7 Deadly Sins games, this time 7 Deadly Sins Origins, has been confirmed for the PlayStation 5 and Steam. Netflix has really done some crazy things with confusing what is real anime made for a Japanese audience by mostly Japanese creators and what is just designed to pretend like it's anime. They even took a popular anime and made a live action version. I think it's called Kaguru-sama or something like that. It's a gambling crazy anime, and they have made this westernized garbage version of it like they did the live action Death Note movie, and called it Bet, just B-E-T. But the 7 Deadly Sins in particular are also a great example in that I don't really feel like any of the 7 Deadly Sins series was ever designed to be for a Japanese audience in the first place, and it's, I feel like, been promoted a lot to make it seem like it's a lot more successful than it really is. Moving on, Bravely Default Flying Fairy HD Remaster further details its world, minigames, systems, combat, and jobs. Check out this article if you're interested. I mean, I literally just cannot even scroll down. It's several seconds of delay to even scroll down. And boy, is this reminiscent of the experience that used to be working on computers in the old days. 56K modems taking forever to download even a single image, slow CPUs, slow RAM, slow amounts of RAM, video cards that couldn't render images in the first place. A game called Trinity Trigger is now available for iOS and Android. It previously was available for the PS4 and 5 and the Switch and PC. Let's see. Do we have a Steam Link option? Maybe. Yeah. That's going to take forever to load, so let's move forward. Fantasy Out Life I, The Girl Who Steals Time, Switch 2 graphics and load time trailers are available. I guess that's going to highlight graphics and load time. Tamagotchi Plaza basic gameplay trailer is also on Gematsu if you want to check that out. Among Ashes is coming to the Xbox Series on June 6th. It's currently available for PS5 and PC. That's another Steam link I might as well click on. So here we can see Trinity Trigger at the moment is mixed on Steam, so that's a game I can just take off the follow list. And then inherently, if something is mixed or below, the odds of it being ever better than that in its reviews, or almost zero. So I don't really need to check the checkbox because it's no longer an unknown game. It's easy identifiable that if I ever saw this game again, if it got some kind of update or something, I probably would not consider it to make another YouTube short. Now take notes that I just talked for like 20 seconds there to get the fall list to be removed from this game. Inherently, yes, the JavaScript has to be working, which means these screenshots need to be moving around for you to be able to click the button. Then the button has to connect back to the servers and tell it to delete the entry in the database that they have on their servers, as far as whether it's on the follow list or not. Now, interestingly, I would imagine it's probably not even that simple. It's probably more of a thing that you are adding an extra command to say remove this from site, but keep it in the database anyways as like a historical record. In the SQL languages, it's almost always called dropping an entry, not deleting it. And it means the same thing, but to give permission that you can drop entries is pretty risky and typically doesn't have easy ways to undo things. So I wouldn't be surprised if they have a different system to make it look like something is left to follow list without actually removing the entry from the database and giving that permission. Moving on, Wuthering Waves version 2.4 update, Lightly We Toss the Crown, launches June 12th. And we had a decent amount of Gematsu articles here, but we probably won't run into too many other articles today, but then we're going to run into a ton of games that came out on Steam. I'm not 100% sure I even opened up all the games correctly. We talked about the Death Stranding 2 on the Beach game premiere event set for June 8th. And we'll probably talk about it later, but the OBS newest version is adding more multi-track video support for other operating systems other than Windows. I don't know if it already has multi-track video in Windows or what, but it'll probably be a while before YouTube would ever engage with multi-track video, which it probably should have done a long time ago. Speaking of YouTube, they're getting rid of the restore videos to the original version, and they're claiming that it was heavily abused. I have no idea how you could have abused that system, and I really think that they're just claiming that any use of this system at all was heavily abused, because inherently the system was designed so that you could edit out content that would get you a yellow check mark, and maybe it made a nebulous point here where if there was something that was going to get you a community guideline strike in it and you edited it out, maybe there was some assistance that the editor was doing otherwise. And yeah, the only reason you even really would use that editor would be to try to avoid content ID claims and demonetization and community strikes. So undoubtedly, I imagine a lot of people would revert things to the original later on to see if they could edit things out a little bit sharper, or to see if maybe the systems themselves have changed, which it definitely feels like the yellow demonetization process has changed, and that they are trying to make it seem like they're going to demonetize less, but in reality I think they're just going to claim that they're doing more work while actually doing less work in the first place, or they've realized that their automated systems were just completely garbage and are actually doing more work, but I doubt it. I would heavily expect that they are just pretending like they're doing better for the creators, and they aren't. They probably aren't doing better for the viewers either. I closed that tab without even mentioning it. We had already talked about it. Devolver Digital and Kenny Sun, which I've never heard of Kenny Sun, announced a Ball X Pit, the Kenny Sun story. Full reveal set for the Summer Game Fest showcase. So I guess we'll wait for that to happen. A Stellar Blade demo for PC is now available. Save game carries over to the full game. I think I also saw that there was 29 new outfits for Eve, or 29 new outfits in general in Stellar Blade for PC. I should say that. I'm not sure if they are for Eve. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to see another story to say Stellar Blade is also available on Steam now. A game called Lapin for Switch launches October 9th. Lapin, is that related to a bunny? Apparently so. I think Lapin is like a Latin word for bunnies, but it might be Lupin. Regardless, it is about bunnies. Let's see, Super Mario Party Jamboree, Nintendo Switch 2 edition, and Jamboree TV overview trailer are available if you want to look at that. About 10 more Komatsu articles. Hollow Parade Deluxe Edition is coming to the Switch on June 18th. Hollow Live Treasure Mountain Mega Pack is coming to the Switch on June 18th also. Then the Famitsu sales from the 19th to the 25th have been updated. Let's see if we can scroll down this really quickly without running into major problems. And I'm assuming the reason why my macros didn't open up these tabs automatically is just because it's running out of RAM, but there may just be a incredible inconsistency on my macros in general. Yeah. I'm not even going to look at the charts today, so just check out the site yourself if you're interested. The big change certainly will be when the Switch 2 comes out, and when we start seeing comparisons between the Switch 1 and Switch 2 software sales and the Switch 1 and the Switch 2 hardware sales in Japan. Inherently, I imagine not too much is going to change relative to the Switch, so I don't think PlayStation 5 is all of a sudden going to sell a lot more because the Switch 2 is out, or the Xbox is going to sell at all in Japan because of the Switch 2 being out. Although they may get a little bit of a bump as people go out and try and buy the Switch 2 and find they can't get their hands on it. A Atomfall story expansion DLC called Wicked Isle launches June 3rd, which that seems like that's not really enough time to be making this announcement. I'd hoped that Atomfall would have got some more patches and would have potentially just been better received in the long run, but almost certainly we're asking way too much in that case. Yeah. I'm not even sure Atomfall is the game I'm thinking of. This screenshots look very different from the game I'm thinking of. Yeah. See if we can open up a link to Atomfall. forever. Let's see. Absolum. Yeah, Absolum physical editions have been announced for the PS5 and Switch. I'll leave it at that. I don't know what that game really is. Phasmophobia Chronicle update launches June 24th. I'll leave it at that. And Power Wash Simulator, the Muckingham Files 6 update is now available. Okay. I Am Your Beast is coming to the PS5, Xbox Series on June 25th. It's worth pointing out that as I have already gone through a lot of the yeah, this is not the game I'm thinking of at all. This is a completely different game. Okay. But yeah. I'm thinking of some completely different game and I'll never be able to find it. Almost certainly. The algorithm on Steam, as far as more like this, is not going to point me towards anything. Atomic Heart. Ah, yeah, I was talking about just yesterday, so that's why I'm thinking of it. So yeah, I was misremembering Atomic Heart as Atomfall. Anyways, what I was saying before though, as I'm going through the follow list, there is a massive number of games that seem to be listed on Steam and then immediately, within less than 6 months, are delisted from Steam. Either completely, like their page is missing, or the page has been updated to say this game is no longer available on Steam. So it's not even like they're delisted consistently. I wonder if it isn't just a case that there's a massive number of people who have not done the legal due diligence to prove that they actually own everything in the game they're trying to sell, that can get onto Steam Direct and list their games very quickly. And maybe Valve should just straight up put some more pressure on them to prove that they actually own everything that they're selling, but I bet Valve has no real reason to do that unless they were legally required to do it. Or maybe it's a case where games get listed on Steam and immediately the money can't be placed into people's accounts because they've disappeared, or there's something weird going on, or maybe they're Russian developers and then it's illegal for Steam and Valve to do any business with Russian developers. I have no idea, but there is just a massive number of games that get delisted. And then there's a big chunk. Well, let's say if it is maybe 25, maybe 20% of all games just get delisted completely in less than 6 months, there's probably another 25% at least of games that are just absolutely awful that are also on the follow list, which should have never really been on the follow list in the first place. So once I started to use the follow list as a marker as far as whether I'd made a YouTube short on it and stopped using it as an actual follow list, I set myself up for just a nightmare scenario. And then there's probably a third 25% of games that look good, but they've been on Steam for 6 months to a year and they've gotten no reviews, or they've gotten 10 or 20 reviews, which at some point makes them just so incredibly irrelevant that it becomes very hard for me to put them on the wish list when they're just bigger, more well-known games that I still haven't played. Like, I really just don't want to be that obscure playing a game that has one review, particularly if I'm, in a lot of cases, those games are wanting like $8 to $10 for their game with no reviews to prove to me that they are even worth $8 to $10. Yeah, I'm certainly not rolling in money, so I want to be careful here. Achilles Survivor is coming to the PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series, and Switch in the second half. Is there a phrase I could use here that can make that shorter? No. I mean, inherently that would have been modern consoles in the past. And now I can't use the phrase modern consoles because the Switch 2 now exists. So things are changing with my text rewriting plugin. Then our last Komatsu article says Miscellaneous A Tiny Tail launches July 22nd. It's a tiny 3D platformer being dated. Right, and then that's going to bring us to the Gaming on Linux articles, which I opened a lot, but I think we're going to get through this a little bit quicker. CRSED, I guess that's Cursed, or Cuisine Royale, devs have confirmed an end of Linux/Steam Deck support. It's Battle Royale from Darkflow Manor. It was previously known as Cursed FOAD. They updated their anti-cheat to BattleEye, where it previously used Easy Anti-Cheat. So there's still just a lot of anti-cheat reasons why these games are not supporting Steam Deck in particular, or SteamOS in particular. Why are these systems not implementing VAX, Valve Account Control Anti-Cheat? Is it just so that incredibly bad? Which probably is, considering how many bots and cheaters I suspect are on Counter-Strike 2. But yeah, you'd think Valve, in this whole effort to make games compatible on Linux, that would be also pushing out a new version of their anti-cheat software, perhaps making it completely free to just get people to use it. I don't know what the real deal there is. I would have to assume it's just really, really bad. Moving on, the Pixel Art RPG Quartet releases August 26th. We already talked about that. Did I actually hit the X there? Yes, I did, and then I closed the next thing, so it said something about a random chaotic game. Kabuto Park is a short, cozy bug catching and battle game, which is out now. And again, I'm not even going to bother to click on links today. If we miss a few games, that's just the price I'm willing to pay. World of Goo 2 gets a rough level editor in Steam Workshop. I don't think anybody's really going to end up playing World of Goo 2 and making it anywhere as popular as it once was. I feel like Giant Bomb was one of those sources, certainly, that also hyped up World of Goo 1. And yeah, so far I have not heard anything as far as what this new Giant Bomb really is going to be. So they're taking some sweet time here, and they may just drag this out in some kind of contract signing legalese for months, if not maybe years. And so by the time a new Giant Bomb emerged from the ashes, it may very well be that the last of its audience has just gone. Meanwhile, fandom may be very well just hoping that Giant Bomb dies down, and then they can use the Wikipedia and maybe the domains and never sign a contract to actually sell Giant Bomb to the creators, but just use the website domains and the Wikipedia to push people towards some other site that doesn't have bomb in the name, which, in fairness, whoever's in charge of the next iteration of Giant Bomb needs to change the name. Of course, you can't change it to Giant B. That's even worse. So, and frankly, you don't want it to evoke the idea that games are bombing and failing in the first place. So, yeah, there's a lot of room for better names there. Gaming on Linux has all the Steam Deck and Linux from Prime Gaming on as of May 30th that you can claim through other launchers, which, yeah, we may have talked about it. I think we did, that the native NVIDIA GeForce Now app for Linux is now out there. So if you wanted to stream games to your Steam Deck or on Linux, that seems like that's in beta at the very least. Okay, so OBS Studio 31.1.0 Beta 1 brings multi-track video to Linux. This release is a nice one for Linux users since it brings multi-track video support, which was previously only available for Windows. That came in with OBS 30.2 release back in July of 2024. For streamers, it means you can send multiple versions of your video at different quality levels to give more viewers a good experience, what Twitch calls enhanced broadcasting. I don't know if any of that works with YouTube, though. If it does, they haven't talked about it where I've seen it. And so they've added it for macOS, Apple Silicon, Linux, and it's going to be a lot of rethinking of what your workflow is. I suspect YouTube may push this idea of multi-track video in particular, so you could dual stream both in vertical and horizontal formats at the same time and let the content creator better control what they are showing. That being said, the way the YouTube app handles vertical and horizontal streams at the same time is not particularly smooth, and definitely feels like you're just splitting your audience between two different videos with an algorithm that doesn't seem like it's capable of merging two videos together and saying that that one video should have its views merged and be treated as the same product. Like, the natural, easy way for this to go would be that there would be one video that pops up in your feed, and you click on that video, and if you're holding your phone in vertical format, it will show you the vertical format of the video, and if you're holding your phone in horizontal format, it'll show you the horizontal format. And I imagine very few people would adapt any other possibilities, like choosing a lower resolution or lower quality to watch videos at, because that seems like that's pretty well built in. I had to move all of my menus and docks, these are called docks, around on my OBS too, because of the game I'm playing for pre-recorded footage. But yeah, there's this, I guess, is the default layout. It's not really a layout I particularly love. Way too much space is used here. You just don't need this middle section to be here. And unless they've added something new, you can't put the preview on the right side and the program on the left side. And this is studio mode. Like, ideally I would just like the program to be most of the screen, and then a lot of these docks to just hover over the program. But yeah, this is the kind of program that could probably use a lot more polish in its interface, and at the very least you could use a very high resolution like 4K monitor to look at it, just so you could get like one 1080p screen and one 1080p screen there. The other things it has updated are kind of basic things. Nothing particularly too surprising, which it's always nice when OBS can add something surprising, but it's kind of hard for them to add anything new or surprising anyways. OBS does manage to just be a rock solid program though that doesn't crash or cause major problems, which that's nice, and that's probably as much as we can ask. Ubuntu 24.04 LTS gets improved Intel GPU support. There is a point here where maybe BattleMage Intel GPUs may finally be good enough to game on Linux, but I don't know if we're even a couple of years away from that, potentially. Let's see. The Long Dark gets a big free visual enhancement update that's out now. Check that out. Actually, I should probably click on this link just to see. That is a update announcement, not a new listing announcement. This game is already on my wish list. And in that case, you have the weirdness of it's not checkboxed now, but it needs to be checkboxed. And I'm gonna have to figure out what my YouTube short macro does when it sees something checkboxed. I'm gonna probably just tell it to uncheck it and check it anyways, and just update the date on it. Now, here we have another game that's dropping Linux support, but for a very different reason. Escape Simulator is dropping its Linux build, its native Linux build, to focus instead on supporting Proton. Yeah, we've decided to stop maintaining a native Linux build. With recent Steam Deck updates, we've encountered too many issues. The good news is the game runs great on Proton, and this allows us to focus on new content for everyone, thanks to our Linux community. They have since changed that statement to say we've decided to stop maintaining the native Linux build. We supported a native Linux version for nearly 4 years, and even though it's always been under 0.5% of our players, Proton now runs the game more reliably than the native build, with fewer crashes, better performance, and most Linux players already switched to it. So, what you don't have here is a case where the developers of Escape Simulator has been given special access to work on Proton, which Proton itself is being only really worked on by Valve employees. But it certainly highlights how there might be a future where they should open source Proton a lot more and let game developers try to put in improvements in code before their games actually go live for the Proton compatibility layer. And certainly, if only a percentage of game developers were helping Valve maintain and improve Proton, that would free up a lot more work for other developers to just make one version of their game and hope that their updates to that one version of the game still work on Proton just fine. And this is perhaps one of the negatives you get with freedom of Linux, in that there are just so many people with so many different distros and flavors of Linux, with so many different versions of either Wine or GE Proton or Proton trying to run video games, and so many different compositors and desktop styles and things, that there is no standards past a certain level that would be compatible. So Proton, taking Windows, which are pretty standard in that there's only one API really you can use. It's a terrible and a huge bloated and very old API as far as programming Windows for Windows, but it's still only one API that has been only controlled by Microsoft. So if you take that awkward standard that is the Windows DirectX API and convert it to using Proton to whatever the Linux distro is using, that compatibility layer and the focus of where the compatibility should happen should definitely be in Proton. And frankly, at this point, it's getting just increasingly silly to suggest that there's anyone who's going to try and play native versions of Linux games without using some form of either Wine or Proton or Proton. Perhaps Valve should allow Proton to be used more easily in other distros, and that would solve a lot of problems also. But we haven't gotten to that point yet. Inherently, most Linux development has just not been focused enough on gaming, and that is where SteamOS and Valve has come in and just revigorated a lot of enthusiasm for Linux and rocked the Linux world, basically. If SteamOS was never created, if the Steam Deck was never created, the news I would hear on a weekly basis from Linux would just be one Linux developer being angry at another Linux developer for some asinine reason that nobody really cares about. Moving on, the NVIDIA stable drivers for 575.57.08 have been released for Linux. I assume here there's probably not too much new here, as a lot of distros are also now moving away from older styles of desktop composition and moving to Wayland, and Wayland is also evolving now fast enough to actually be the desktop compositor that people want to use. Linux itself is definitely evolving. In fact, it's going to basically be a case where a significant amount of what Linux is in the next few years is going to be completely different packages and completely different code from what it has been perhaps for a decade or more in the past. Yeah, more people are talking about Linux. Linus Tech Tips on their podcast were talking about whether it's time again to try SteamOS and do a daily driver challenge to see if they can just run SteamOS and live with it as videos. The Mesa open source graphics drivers 25.0.7 are also being released. Everything basically being released at the same time. Weirdly, I'm only getting the news on Friday though, and you'd think that this would be stuff that may have been announced on Tuesday. I have about 5 more Gaming on Linux articles to go through, and it does feel like we are slowly, just ever so slowly, gaining a little bit of speed as we close more tabs. Apparently Valve has done a couple of small but useful tweaks to developer and publisher homepages, resulting in hopefully a little more visibility. Well, half of the games, when you click on a developer and publisher, don't even have this new generation of homepages. So Valve has tweaked the developer/publisher pages to add various social media links so they will show up at the top. Are we seeing that in that screenshot? Not really. Let me scroll up a little bit more. The thing though that they really need to work on is for developers to be able to have separate pages that are not held hijacked by the publishers, and that when you click on a developer you always get the developer's page and you don't just get redirected. So maybe this about page is new as far as I can tell. Seems like maybe there's a description here too of what the publishers or developers are about. Additionally, these pages will also show up every time you go through the checkout process on Steam to show pages for all developers and publishers involved. An example being below for Nine Kings. Look at the bottom right. Right. Okay, so this is all about staying within the follow list of following developers, which would just show up in your newsfeed, which is something I didn't even know existed until a few weeks ago on Steam. So that they're trying to promote the idea of following developers, which isn't the worst thought ever. Like, there's a couple of developers, so it's really just this follow button more than likely, which weirdly may just be a step towards gamifying being a developer and publisher on Steam. And who knows, maybe we'll start to have some kind of vouching system where you have to have somebody vouch for you and have a certain number of followers before you can release a second game on Steam. On top of that, Valve made it easier for developers to link games to their home pages so nothing gets missed. As developers set up a new store page for a new game, they can link them right where, as before, they were entirely separate pages. So little back-end website tweaks that may affect game developers almost none, or it may affect game developers a little bit, but it's going to affect most gamers and consumers very little. It would be interesting to see comments, frankly, as far as how many people normally and actively go to a developer's page or publisher's page. I look at every single game that comes out on Steam 3 times a week, and even I don't go to game developers and publishers pages that often. Moving on, Rematch is working well on Linux Steam Deck / Steam Deck in the beta. Easy anti-cheat, fully enabled in Proton. So yeah, it's really just a BattleEye issue, it seems like, for that one game. Maybe it would be just easier for Valve to throw a bunch of money to BattleEye and say, hey, tell us, make it so your anti-cheat works on SteamOS. Let's see, Ubuntu is getting monthly snapshot testing releases, which is changing their release schedule. It's kind of hard to suggest using Ubuntu at this point, though. They really just are not offering anything. Although, ironically, Ubuntu is basically tried to do exactly the same thing that Valve did with SteamOS and failed miserably, because Ubuntu was trying to sell itself as just a standard desktop operating system with some special kind of proprietary features, but they weren't trying to sell themselves with games. Ubuntu didn't have any kind of successful hardware, that it was associated with, nor did it have a majorly successful website that sells video games like Steam. And Ubuntu just tried it way too early. So every mistake that Ubuntu ran into in their process, I wouldn't be surprised if Valve was paying some attention to that and learned from it. Although in fairness, people were hating on Ubuntu pretty heavily years before SteamOS came out. We talked about the GeForce Now app for Steam Deck having arrived. Oh, I should also mention, since I'm talking about the Steam Deck so much, there's a slick deals for a USB-C hub that would work fine with a Steam Deck. It's small and thin for about $8, so about half off the $20 you'd pay for a cheap hub. Now with that, you're not getting any kind of M2 style NVIDIA connector, but honestly, do you really need that for a dock? And yeah, this is a hub, not dock, so it's not going to make your device stand up nice on a table, but I'm not sure you really need that either, and that's just going to take up more space. It's not the official Steam dock, but it does have several USB ports that had keyboards, mouse, and an external hard drive, which, yes, an external USB spinning hard drive would be much cheaper and give you a lot more space, and you wouldn't be playing games directly off of it anyways. And it has a 4K, at least at 60 Hz HDMI output, and power goes into it up to 100 watts, whereas the Steam Deck can only take 65 watts in anyways, so you're getting 35 extra watts to power all the other USB things. Now, the thing about these hubs, though, is that they almost never come with a power plug themselves. So, you probably are going to end up spending another $20 down the line to put a USB-C plug into it to give it power, which sucks. But in the meantime, you can use the plug that came with a Steam Deck as your power source, and then you would just always charge your Steam Deck by plugging it into the hub. There's no fancy holder for the hub, as far as I can tell, to get it to stick to the back of your Steam Deck if you're just going to have it there at all times, but you could probably put some double stick tape on it or do something like that. Moving on, Action Game Maker devs exploring Linux support for the editor and exports, which is an interesting thought. Action Game Maker, is that the same developers who make RPG Maker though? Or is that different devs? Yeah, it is the developers for RPG Maker, and perhaps that is the worst thing that can happen. It is, I think, also worth pointing out that if you want to make a game and you don't know how to make a game, use the Godot engine, watch some YouTube tutorials. You'll make a game that is more unique than anything that any of the RPG Maker or Action Game Maker would give you, and it will teach you and put you down the path of learning how to make even better games. Whereas using RPG Maker, using Action Game Maker is going to pigeonhole you to only using their software and only making a very specific type of game that has already been demonized as far as things that gamers just are not interested in anymore. There's been way too many RPG Maker looking games on Steam over the past decade. And frankly, we're not even seeing a lot of them nowadays at all. It's going to bring us to GameDeveloper.com articles, which I only have 2 articles here. ZeniMax QA Union has signed a tentative bargaining agreement with Microsoft. Quote, "We're the ones who make these games and will be the ones who set the new standards for fair treatment." And it seems like they've created a new logo, the ZeniMax Union, which This is the QA testers in particular. This is still part of the CWA, Communication Workers of America, and I still think that there is probably still a push for the beginning of these tentative bargaining agreements amongst Activision Blizzard and other studios that Microsoft has. Yep. And yeah, I don't know if there's too much more details to really go into that. That getting a bargaining agreement is really just agreeing to set a set standard of rules, which usually are pretty standard anyways, as far as how you're going to start negotiating actual contracts. So they really haven't gotten to the point where actual contracts get negotiated as far as what are the grounds in which an employee can be laid off, what are the grounds in which an employee can be terminated, what are the grounds in which work is assigned and what kind of work can be assigned, and what are the grounds of, most importantly to many, as far as what people will be paid and what hours they might be given, which a lot of times these contracts don't negotiate for things like hours, and so you'll often see in union jobs the management just having extremely years-long hiring freezes and letting people drift away and leave the jobs of their own accord, leaving the remaining employees to maybe be paid a little bit better and a lot of overtime, but then be forced a massive amount of mandatory overtime, which can easily break someone mentally and physically if you really should only be working, say, 8 hours a day and they're giving you 10 to 12 hours a day, 6-7 days a week potentially. So yeah, agreement as far as the beginnings of agreement. And then The Witcher 3 apparently has earned almost $650 million after a decade on the shelves. The Polish company also confirmed that Cyberpunk 2 has entered pre-production. Now, weirdly, I would have thought that there would have been 300 million units sold around The Witcher 3, and maybe I'm wrong about that. If anything, this would more imply that somewhere around 11 million units were sold at $60 to get to 600 million, which, yeah, it seems like a kind of low number, particularly over the course of 10 years. Maybe 650 million after all the massive development costs might make more sense. Yeah, that number seems really low. And certainly, I guess this may be another great example of where even AAA development has just gotten way too expensive, that I'm talking on a scale that says hundreds of millions of dollars are not enough. And that doesn't really change too much either, because it basically is just going to ask the question as far as what is the next big Witcher game going to be like. Yeah, I'm saying no here, in part because I'm gonna have to take another short bathroom break. I was gonna go through these 3 or 4 Steam games that are out of place first. Yeah. just be kind of cruel and close a bunch and not make YouTube shorts on it. Alright, well, I'm gonna take just a brief break here. So I'm not gonna even try and bring up Yu-Gi-Oh! So I'll be back in just a minute. Okay, I'm back, and really at this point I should just be thanking people for bearing with me. For if anybody actually is bearing with me every time I have to take these bathroom breaks, which are frequent and not fun. So yeah, I'm hoping I opened all the tabs that I needed to. If not, I'm gonna miss some games here. And my macros, well, not my macros, but my gestures here are going to just be far too slow. So I'm going to have to, and yeah, Firefox wants to reboot, but if Firefox reboots, it's going to lose potentially access to my follow list. So I don't want to lose that, but inherently I may have to reboot anyways to close enough tabs. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do everything fairly manually here. It's gonna be slow. Yeah, again, I just have to apologize for this whole process. And inherently, I should probably go and overclock the RAM back on my computer. I did also go in there and turn down the fans on my computer, but honestly, I don't think it's the fans on my computer that make that much noise as much as it is just my central AC shoving out cooling altogether. Yeah, at some point maybe I should try to reduce the amount of cooling I'm doing with my AC anyways. I don't know how much or what more I can really do. Yeah. Inherently, and I imagine this is the case for a lot of people, things are just going to go by fine financially for me, and then all of a sudden something's going to happen, or I'm going to look at my bank accounts after a prolonged amount of time of not looking at them and realize, oh, now I'm screwed, and then it's just going to be a desperate overreaction of, yeah, just turn off the air conditioner completely in the middle of the summer and burn to death, or start eating beans and rice, things like that. And a lot of people just always live in that state anyways, where it's constantly a case of disaster. Some of these games that I saw definitely felt like they might be very old games, and I have thought that somehow my macro was opening up links to things that were on the follow list, but I don't know how that would really be the case. Yeah. Now, I probably could pinpoint that disaster point for most people. It's going to be around Black Friday this year, where people are going to still want that same old lifestyle and that they've had in the past, and then they're not going to actually be able to afford it. This is one that's actually taken come out of early access, I guess, or come out, and it's very positive. And noticeably, this is one of the early experimental ones, because notice that this has a Greenwich Mean Time and Essential Daylight Standing Time in its code, whereas I changed the code very early in the development to just say the date there was just no reason to really have a specific time there. So yeah, this would have had to have been one of 2 or 3 test pages I was working with earlier when I was setting up my checkbox code here. Interesting. So we've already gone full circle with at least one of the test sample pages. Where am I? Here. Yeah, and do I have anything else to say? No. Yeah, I guess I could hope for a great Christmas for everyone, a great rest of the year, but I just don't see how that's gonna be the case. And personally, I don't know. Unless I can actually accomplish things that I'm not gonna be able to accomplish. I don't expect that I'll be anywhere better by this time Christmas than I am right now. Hopefully my house will be more clean and decluttered, but it at a certain point may just be empty after that point. There were several SCP games that got removed from my follow list because they were just not good quality games. They weren't reviewed or they weren't relevant. I guess as far as YouTube goes, if I could, I mean, today's the 30th. The chances right now of me getting anything scheduled by the 1st are 0. But if I could get things scheduled maybe by the 15th or so, or just maybe the 2nd Monday or 3rd Monday of the year of the next month, maybe then I'd start putting out enough footage. But realistically, it's probably going to take a couple months to get another 1,000 hours of watch time to even begin down the path of whether YouTube would ever make me advertised. Oh, which by the way, they're rolling out this thing that they had never talked about it before, in which they're going to pause the audio of live streams and roll ads side by side when you're watching horizontally. So there's just going to be a ad that pops up and your video is going to shrink automatically. The content creator's video is going to shrink, and then there's going to be an ad to the side of it, and the audio is going to be paused, and then an ad will play. So I don't see how that is going to feel much better than doing the mid-roll ad in the old way, because really all it's going to say is that some percentage of people are now going to miss out on what's being discussed, which I think YouTube may very quickly see that a lot of people are going to end up jumping back to hear what was being discussed and feel like that was even worse than interrupting the video. Now, inherently, I don't know if a mid-roll ad just makes it impossible for you to see and hear the footage that's being live streamed anyways. I think I would want to be very cautious about running mid-roll ads during live streams in particularly if I was a bigger content creator and people were getting in the chat and I was actually able to communicate with them. Here's another game that can leave the follow list. But I think non-manually placed mid-roll ads, which OBS I still don't think has any capability of doing that. I don't think there's a button through OBS that can be triggered to trigger ads on YouTube. I don't think that there's a API command that can be sent to trigger ads on YouTube, which obviously if I was going to trigger ads on YouTube, I'd trigger it when I take a bathroom break. That would make the most sense ever. But yeah, I don't think you can do that. And certainly it does speak to how ridiculously long all of these streams are. I'm taking at least 2 bathroom breaks on average for a 3 to 4 hour. Well, it's only been 2.5 hours and I've already taken 2 bathroom breaks, and I started late because I was in the bathroom before then. So yeah. Certainly not in the healthiest of spots as far as any kind of manager or employer would be happy. Here it looks like we've gotten our first actual Chinese political game taking on Trump. Yep, English and simplified Chinese. Which, yeah, that is seemingly an interesting twist, because for the most part Chinese games have tried to be very apolitical for fear that somebody in the Chinese government might not take likely like what levels or amount of politicalness their games were. So for them to be given to feel like they're free to make a anti-America political game is kind of surprising. Where inherently I imagine there's probably a lot of released in China only anti-America games right now, and probably have been for previous administrations too. Yeah. The world is never going to become one united world unless we have like aliens that to unite us or something that we go to war with. It's just too many countries that have systems established to compete and try and be angry at, for lack of a better term, other countries. It's just become institutional. It's a little shocking, frankly, that we don't see more mergers of countries happen. But every single little country has some problems with it, their neighbors. And yeah, most countries have people inside their countries that they have problems with too. So yeah, I don't expect any real unity to ever show up. Probably. There was a massive amount of games that came out on Steam. According to my macro, it was like 167 plus. So seems like there's definitely somebody was catching up. Yeah, I see some of these games on Steam like this where having a reversey game kind of makes some sense, but also paying even $1 for a reversing game seems kind of crazy. And weirdly, having a portable handheld to play something like Solitaire or Reversey makes it make a little bit more sense to have those games on Steam. But weirdly, also, Steam Deck in desktop mode. Hell piping cursor of a bubble, but do I want to make a YouTube short on this? Or, I mean, I don't even know what I can do with this otherwise. Guess I'll say yes. Although I'm trying to be pretty cruel here and really filter out things that don't scream good quality. It's hard to hold them to any real standard though. You just never know what might be way better than the screenshots seem to imply to me in the half second that I'm actually looking at the games. Yeah. Probably should automatically close things that say English is not supported too. There's quite a few games like that that are also on the fall list for some reason. It just looks like a cell phone game. I'm having trouble now because the pages don't even want to move. Here we see Elden Ring, Night Rain being mixed reviewed. And see, that's big enough to make a YouTube short even if it is mixed reviewed. It's just moving really slow. Now I'm trying to think if there would be any way to speed up this process. I just don't know if there really is. At some level, it would feel like you could download these pages to your local hard drive and access them faster that way. But I don't think so. I think it's your browser is basically doing that already. It's just a case that the browser, the Firefox in my case, which is really the only browser I can use, is not designed to scale at this level. Yeah, it's kind of pointless to even talk about saying, well, at some point here I want to build a new computer, because yeah, I just don't think that's on the table for the moment. I think it makes a lot more sense to first do the flawless cleanup, second finish making the content I'm making, third start scheduling videos and holding myself to a hard goal of scheduling all the videos that I have uploaded over the past few months to actually have a lineup of at least 2 pre-recorded games coming out, hopefully until at least Christmas. It may be closer to being done than I would have thought. Yeah, there's still not really anything jumping out at me. Let's go ahead and take this one off the follow list. Yeah, there's inherently something about my macros in general that I just wish there was a way to make them run faster, and I don't see a way really to do it. There's a built-in delay in the way they activate. And there's so far been no way for me to figure out how to get around that delay. I think it probably is going to be a point at some point where I'm going to have to rethink a lot of visual novels on the wish list, and a lot of full motion video style games on my wish list too. I question whether a lot of those are ever going to be played by me. Of course, I don't want to be pigeonholed into a specific thing. Some of these tabs are just going to be out of order. This I think is an adult game, if I was to guess. But not really 100% sure. Do we want a ramen mastery game? Maybe. Yep. Elden Ring Night Rain launches today and works on Linux, SteamOS, and Steam Deck from Gaming on Linux. Out of nowhere. Then you have a spatial awareness game that just doesn't look like enough of a game for me. Anyways, I started to say I don't want to be pigeonholed into playing any specific type of game, but it does definitely feel like I also haven't found much of a stride in any of the content I've made. So yeah, and some of the most successful videos I've made are things that I couldn't make more footage on or wouldn't want to make more footage on. But yeah, I've been playing a lot of CCGs over the career of my YouTube page, and they've only had some moderate success. Played a lot of point and clicks, no real success there. A lot of puzzle games, no real success there. And then Lego games had some success, but there's only a couple Lego games left. Anyways, we'll point out that EA closed Black Panther. I canceled Black Panther and closed Cliffhanger Games. I think we have like 3 more tabs. But yeah, I will admit, I almost don't want there to be some like massive success on Steam. I mean, not on Steam, on YouTube for me, to the point where it just forces me to you get a lot of these old games that feel like they might be historically relevant, but then they get very poorly reviewed. I don't know what to do there. Did this one just come out of early access? I think it might have. So yeah, it's not so much a fear of success that I think I suffer from. It's a fear of just being pigeonholed into something, or being pushed to doing something where all of a sudden this job becomes like so many other jobs, and where the bottom dollar is the only thing that matters. And I definitely don't want to have to run a channel or live like that. That is a little too greedy for my style. Of course, also, I'm getting exactly 0 cents and $0 at the moment for my channel, and could really benefit from receiving a living wage from this channel, as anyone could. Definitely have a concern at some point. I'm just gonna realize I'm running out of food and realize I don't have any cash to buy groceries. Not anywhere close to that at the moment, but who knows. So, yeah, I'm not sure how many more tabs are left. I thought I was close to being done. See, I don't know what happened here, specifically with this one game, that it didn't load at all. But it didn't load at all. See, if we started to see a lot of things that were checkboxed, that would tell me we went too far. Although I don't know how my macro would have gone too far. This is 29, and so we may even see some games that are from 28. I also did a little bit of work on my Discord, but I'm kind of backing off on being too enthusiastic about it at the moment. I made a QR code. At some point I may update an interstitial in my live streams to show off the Discord QR code, which in fairness is probably not going to be very helpful for people, because I imagine a lot of people are going to be watching it on their phone on YouTube, and so being able to click a QR code is not going to be that helpful at all. Yeah, but what I'm doing is mostly just dumping mostly meme images over the course of a year from my personal Facebook page into different categories, and I still don't really understand what the difference between a channel and a thread and a Discord really are. So yeah, I don't expect my Discord is going to grow wildly, although it would be nice if it did. Just to have one app to focus on. Which, yeah, inherently, the EC World of Goo is rated very positively. I'll go ahead and put that on the wish list, I guess. Yeah, I'd like one app to rule them all for social medias, and I'm still in a very bad position with my smart home as far as one app to rule them all for smart homes. My irrigation system run by Ratio does not communicate with anything other than Google Home. Google Home is awful and doesn't integrate things well. My hot water heater doesn't integrate into any other apps other than Google Home's. Again, it doesn't work well. My door locks have their own separate app, and that's not even including Govee, which I have one strand of Govee smart lights that have their own app, and all of those actually, with the exception of the water heater, may have an argument to have their own separate app, but at the end of the day, I just want them all to either connect to Google Home so I can then sync from Google Home to the Tuya app, where the vast majority of my smart devices are, or all of those devices should be replaced slowly and just cautiously with cheap Chinese Tuya devices instead, which I don't know if I can really wire up a Tuya thermostat to my water heater. It seems like that'd be a very risky thing to do, so I'm not really interested in doing that. I don't know if there even is a Tuya irrigation system that I would want to use. I don't even know if there's a Tuya air conditioner unit to replace my Ecobee thermostats with, which they have their own separate app too. So it's like 5 or 6 different apps, and that's excluding the SwitchBot app for my smart mopping robot, which, with the house being a mess at the moment, has not been able to mop anything in months. And yeah, I have like a dash cam app for my car's dash cam too. It'd be nice if that was in the smart home integration, but in fairness, I couldn't think what you really would do to integrate that particularly well to do anything. Best thing my smart dash cam could do, if I got a new smart dash cam, which is a hard sales pitch, would be for it to act as a extra camera on my security system when it is parked close enough to connect to the Wi-Fi, and then if anybody tried to walk in front of the car, they would be seen. That doesn't even work that way. It only powers on when the car is on. Okay, well, I'm mostly rambling here, and this is, I think, the point where I have to end the stream. We've gone through a whole bunch of games on Steam, hopefully all of the games on Steam, but maybe not, and looked at them and found nothing really too interesting, which unfortunately has just become the default. So hopefully the audio worked. Hopefully I can clean up the follow list and close a whole bunch more tabs. So I've got a lot more work to do for this evening, which is going to keep me up later in the evening than I probably should stay up, which is another issue, but I have really no options. That's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.